The soft glow of the restaurant's candlelight barely illuminated Liam's face, yet Sarah could sense the familiar barrier rising between them. They'd been on a handful of dates, conversations flowing easily on the surface, but whenever she tried to delve deeper, to touch on something truly personal, a subtle shift occurred. His eyes would glaze over, his body language stiffen, and he'd skillfully pivot the conversation back to trivialities. It was like approaching a beautiful, intricate shell on the shoreline. You admire its beauty, its delicate patterns, but the moment your finger brushes against it, it snaps shut or scurries away, disappearing into the protective shadows. This fear of intimacy, this profound inability to let down one's guard, leaves a hollow ache in relationships, a constant dance of approach and retreat. We long for connection, for true understanding, but a primal, almost unconscious mechanism kicks in, pulling us back from the brink of vulnerability. Why do we build these invisible walls around our hearts, armored against the very closeness we crave? What ancient instinct compels us to retreat into our shells at the slightest touch, even when that touch is born of kindness and desire? Perhaps by observing the armored inhabitant of the tide pools, we can begin to understand the complex architecture of our own guarded souls. The air in the quiet coffee shop was warm, scented with roasted beans, but for Clara, an invisible chill permeated the space. Across the small, worn table sat David, his eyes kind, his smile gentle. They had been talking for an hour, easy conversation about books and travel, and Clara felt a rare flicker of genuine connection, a gentle warmth spreading through her chest. Then, David leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a softer tone. "Tell me, Clara, what's something you're truly passionate about? Something that deeply moves you?" Her breath hitched. The simple, innocent question felt like a direct invasion. Instantly, a familiar, icy wave of emotional guardedness washed over her. Her smile stiffened. Her gaze darted away towards the bustling street outside. Her heart began to pound, a frantic drum against the walls of her ribs. She felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to retreat, to vanish. The warmth dissipated, replaced by a cold, protective shell closing around her. She mumbled a vague, generic answer about her work, pulling back, effectively shutting down the nascent intimacy, leaving David with a quizzical, slightly bewildered look. This profound sense of emotional guardedness finds its perfect parallel in the very existence of the crab. These fascinating crustaceans are defined by their exoskeleton, a formidable, natural armor that encases their vulnerable, soft bodies. This shell is their primary defense mechanism against predators and environmental threats. A crab's approach is often characterized by a slow, cautious sidle, constantly assessing its surroundings. It might tentatively extend a claw, testing the waters, but at the slightest perceived threat or unexpected touch, it will instantly retract its limbs, scuttle backward, or completely bury itself in the sand. This isn't aggression. It's an instinctive, primal self-preservation response. Their armor allows them to navigate a dangerous world, but it also dictates a life of inherent caution and a rapid retreat from anything that breaches their carefully maintained perimeter. For the crab, vulnerability is an existential threat, and its shell is the ultimate solution. The human experience of emotional guardedness mirrors the crab's armored existence on a deeply psychological and neurological level. In humans, experiences of past hurt, betrayal, or rejection can lead to the development of a metaphorical emotional armor. The amygdala, a key region in the brain's limbic system responsible for processing fear and threat, becomes hypervigilant. When a seemingly innocuous question or a gentle gesture of intimacy is perceived as a potential threat to one's vulnerability, the brain triggers a fight, flight, or freeze response, often manifesting as withdrawal or deflection. This protective mechanism, while designed to prevent pain, can also inadvertently prevent deep connection. Evolutionary psychology suggests that our ancestors, who faced physical and social threats, developed similar protective instincts. Just as the crab's shell defends its soft body, our psychological defenses protect our emotional core, even when the threat is merely the discomfort of intimacy. The underlying instinct is one of self-preservation at all costs, prioritizing safety over potential relational rewards. Clara, sitting across from David, felt the internal battle rage. The desire for connection warred fiercely with the overwhelming primal urge to retreat, to hide behind her impenetrable walls. She was confronting her deepest fear, the terrifying prospect of vulnerability. Would she continue to allow her past hurts to dictate her present, forcing her into a lonely, emotionally armored existence? Or would she, like a crab tentatively emerging from its burrow, dare to shed a layer of that self-protection, risking the discomfort of exposure for the profound possibility of genuine connection? Her instinct was to pull away, to maintain the safety of distance. But the aching emptiness she felt, the longing for authentic closeness, now demanded a different choice. She had to acknowledge that her armor was not just protecting her, but also isolating her. The crab's armored existence, its instinctive retreat from perceived threats, offers a profound metaphor for the complex human dance with intimacy and self-protection. It teaches us that while emotional armor can shield us from pain, it can also imprison us in solitude, preventing the very connection we crave. By understanding the primal impulse that drives the crab to seek refuge in its shell, we are invited to confront the origins of our own guardedness. May we learn from the crab to approach new connections with caution, yet also to recognize when our defenses, though once necessary, are now hindering our growth. True courage lies not in never being hurt, but in daring to emerge from our shells, even at the risk of a gentle touch, to find the deeper, richer waters of authentic human connection. Michael felt an unsettling tremor when his therapist suggested he talk about his childhood. He could discuss his current anxieties, his career struggles, even his fleeting romantic relationships with a detached, analytical air. But delving into the past, into the raw, unformed experiences of his youth, felt like peeling away layers of skin. A cold sweat broke out on his brow. His mind immediately went blank, a defensive mechanism. He felt profoundly vulnerable, exposed, as if the very air in the room became too thin. The thought of revealing those deep, unhealed wounds, of letting someone truly see his inner fragility, brought a wave of nausea. He desperately wanted to connect, to heal, but the inherent risk of emotional nakedness felt unbearable. A terrifying prospect that left him breathless and desperate to flee. The concept of vulnerability is central to the life cycle of the crab. Despite their formidable armor, crabs undergo a periodic process called molting, during which they shed their old, restrictive exoskeletons to grow. During this critical period, they are incredibly soft, defenseless, and utterly exposed. This is the most dangerous time in a crab's life. They retreat into crevices, bury themselves in the sand, or hide under rocks, waiting for their new shell to harden. This state of profound softness is essential for growth, but it is also a moment of extreme, life-threatening exposure. The crab's natural instinct during molting is to seek absolute isolation and maximum concealment, driven by the knowledge that its very survival depends on avoiding any contact, any perceived threat, during this period of ultimate fragility. They embody the truth that vulnerability is often a prerequisite for growth, but it comes with immense, inherent risk. The human experience of vulnerability aligns powerfully with the crab's molting process. In psychology, revealing one's deeper fears, past traumas, or emotional insecurities is an act of profound vulnerability. This often triggers responses in the limbic system, particularly the insula, which processes bodily sensations and emotional states, leading to feelings of discomfort or anxiety. Our prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive functions, might try to avoid these uncomfortable feelings by erecting psychological defenses. People who have experienced emotional trauma or rejection in early life often develop an intense aversion to vulnerability, associating it with pain and danger. Just as the soft crab retreats to hide, a traumatized individual might instinctively recoil from situations that demand emotional openness, even when such openness is crucial for healing and building genuine connection. The underlying evolutionary drive is self-protection, avoiding re-experiencing intense pain by maintaining emotional distance. Michael, squirming uncomfortably in his chair, now understood the visceral nature of his reaction. His fear wasn't irrational. It was an ancient, primal warning system screaming at him to hide, to protect his exposed softness. The confrontation was not with his therapist, but with the raw, terrifying prospect of molting in front of another human being. Would he continue to live perpetually in his old restrictive shell, hindering his growth, avoiding the very discomfort necessary for true healing? Or would he, like the vulnerable crab, dare to seek a safe space, however temporary, to shed his hardened defenses, allowing himself to be seen in his fragility, hoping a new, stronger self could emerge? His choice was between continued stagnation and the terrifying, yet promising, path of emotional metamorphosis. The crab's necessary period of vulnerability during molting offers a poignant and powerful metaphor for the human journey of growth and healing. It teaches us that true transformation often requires shedding old, protective layers, even if it means enduring a period of profound exposure and discomfort. By observing the crab's instinct to retreat and protect its softness, we are invited to acknowledge the immense courage it takes to be vulnerable. May we learn from the crab to create safe spaces for our own emotional molting, to respect our need for protection, and to understand that true strength often emerges from the deepest moments of our own tender, exposed vulnerability, allowing us to grow into a more authentic and resilient version of ourselves. Sophia yearned for a deeper connection with her new partner, Alex. He was kind, attentive, and consistently patient. Yet, every time he tried to take a step closer, a shared secret, a tender touch, a discussion about the future, Sophia felt an inexplicable recoil. It was subtle, almost imperceptible. She would agree to move in together, then find herself nitpicking apartment details, creating small, almost unconscious obstacles. She wanted to trust, desperately, but a deep ingrained skepticism, born from past betrayals, whispered warnings in her ear. She was like a ghost, hovering around intimacy, but unable to fully inhabit it. Her hands would fidget, her gaze would waver. The constant internal push and pull, this profound struggle with trust, left her feeling perpetually exhausted and profoundly isolated, even when surrounded by love. The crab's behavior towards new environments or potential mates is characterized by a tentative, cautious advance. When a crab encounters something new, it doesn't rush in. It uses its antennae to sample the water, its eyes to scan for movement, and its claws to gently probe the ground. Its approach is slow, deliberate, and highly sensitive to external stimuli. If there's any sudden movement, any perceived threat, or even a subtle shift in its environment, the crab will instantly retract, pulling its limbs tight against its body and seeking cover. Its initial trust is minimal, requiring constant validation and a complete absence of negative stimuli to proceed. This cautious stance reflects a deep-seated instinct to minimize risk, to prioritize safety over immediate engagement. For the crab, trust is earned incrementally through consistent predictability and the absence of harm. The human struggle with trust closely mirrors the crab's tentative, cautious advance. In neuroscience, the ventromedial prefrontal cortex is involved in assessing risk and reward in social interactions, while the amygdala alerts us to potential threats. Individuals who have experienced relational trauma, such as abandonment or betrayal, often develop an insecure attachment style. This can lead to hypervigilance in new relationships, where every gesture is scrutinized for signs of potential harm. Like the crab, they approach intimacy with a deep-seated caution, constantly testing the waters. A kind word might draw them closer, but an unexpected slight, however minor, can trigger an immediate, instinctual retreat. This isn't a conscious choice to distrust, but a deeply wired protective mechanism, a learned response that prioritizes emotional safety by minimizing vulnerability, even at the cost of deep connection. The underlying drive is to avoid re-experiencing past pain by maintaining a safe distance. Sophia, despite her longing for closeness, found herself constantly retreating, a painful echo of her past. She faced a profound confrontation. Would she continue to allow the ghost of past betrayals to dictate her present and future, forever holding love at arm's length? Or would she, like a crab gradually accustomed to a safe tide pool, slowly, tentatively, risk a deeper engagement, allowing Alex's consistent kindness to chip away at her armor? Her instinct was to pull back, to protect her heart. But the persistent loneliness, the unfulfilled yearning for genuine intimacy, now demanded a different, bolder choice. She had to acknowledge that her tentative advance was also a barrier, preventing the very trust she desperately sought to build. The crab, as tentative advance and instant retraction, offers a powerful lesson on the complex nature of trust in human relationships. It teaches us that for those who have been hurt, trust is not freely given, but painstakingly earned through consistent, gentle, and predictable interactions. By observing the crab's cautious behavior, we are invited to cultivate patience and understanding, both for ourselves and for others who struggle with vulnerability. May we learn from the crab to build trust incrementally, to recognize the subtle signals of fear and self-protection, and to understand that true intimacy is often found in the quiet persistence of gentle attempts, slowly, carefully, bridging the gap between two guarded hearts, allowing them to finally emerge from their protective shells. Daniel found himself in a heated argument with his best friend Mark. Mark, frustrated, finally blurted out, "You never let anyone in, Daniel. You build walls around yourself, even with me." Daniel's body instantly tensed. A wave of intense anger flared, not necessarily at Mark, but at the unfairness of the accusation, and perhaps at the truth it contained. His voice sharpened, becoming cold and cutting. He launched into a rapid-fire series of counter-arguments, deflecting Mark's emotional honesty with logic and subtle blame-shifting. He felt a primal urge to defend himself, to strike back, to push Mark away before he could get too close, before he could expose a deeper vulnerability. This intense self-protective reflex, this automatic deployment of sharp words and emotional distance, was his default whenever anyone threatened to pierce his carefully constructed emotional barrier. He felt an intense, internal pressure to maintain his impenetrable facade, even if it meant alienating those he cared about. The crab's primary defense mechanism is its formidable claws. These powerful appendages are used not only for foraging and fighting, but, most importantly, for self-protection. When a crab feels threatened, its immediate, instinctual response is to raise its claws defensively, positioning them to pinch, to ward off, or to push away any perceived danger. This action is swift, automatic, and highly effective. The crab doesn't engage in complex analysis. It reacts with a primal, hardwired reflex to protect its vulnerable body. Its defensive posture is not always about direct attack, but often about creating distance, signaling stay away, or preventing further intrusion. For the crab, its claws are its shield and its sword, a testament to its unwavering commitment to survival in a harsh, unpredictable environment. The human impulse for self-protection often manifests in ways strikingly similar to the crab's defensive claw display. When an individual feels emotionally threatened, perhaps by criticism, perceived judgment, or the discomfort of vulnerability, the amygdala triggers a rapid, unconscious defensive reaction. This can manifest as sharp words, immediate emotional withdrawal, anger, sarcasm, or even aggressive counterattacks. These are our metaphorical claws, designed to create distance and protect our inner vulnerable selves. Evolutionary psychology suggests that such defensive behaviors are rooted in primal survival instincts, aimed at preserving social standing and preventing harm in group dynamics. Just as the crab reflexively raises its claws, a person with a strong need for self-protection might instinctively deploy verbal or emotional defenses to avoid feeling exposed or hurt, even if it damages the very connection they desire. The underlying drive is avoidance of perceived pain, prioritizing immediate emotional safety over long-term relational benefits. Daniel's anger and sharp words were his claws snapping shut, a primal response to the threat of intimacy. He was now forced to confront the destructive nature of this automatic self-protective reflex. Would he continue to alienate those who tried to get close, perpetually pushing away potential connection in the name of safety? Or would he, like a crab learning to trust a gentle hand, consciously choose to lower his defenses, risking the discomfort of vulnerability for the possibility of deeper, more meaningful bonds? His instinct was to fight, to defend, to create distance. But the growing loneliness, the isolation caused by his own barriers, now demanded a different approach. He had to acknowledge that his claws were not just protecting him, but also severing him from genuine connection. The crab's defensive claws offer a powerful, stark metaphor for the human instinct of self-protection. It teaches us that while defenses can shield us from immediate pain, they can also tragically prevent us from forming the very connections our hearts yearn for. By observing the crab's automatic response to perceived threat, we are invited to understand the origins of our own reactive behaviors. May we learn from the crab to recognize when our claws are deployed unnecessarily, to differentiate between genuine threats and the discomfort of intimacy, and to understand that true strength lies not in impenetrable armor, but in the courage to selectively lower our defenses, allowing for the possibility of authentic connection, even with its inherent risks. Maria was terrified of being alone, yet her biggest fear was rejection. Every time a new relationship began to deepen, every time a new friendship moved beyond superficiality, a chilling certainty would grip her. They'll eventually leave. This overwhelming fear of rejection led her to unconsciously sabotage potential connections. She would become overly critical or distant, or find reasons to pull away herself before the inevitable perceived abandonment could occur. She longed for true connection, for someone to truly see her and stay, but the pain of past rejections felt too acute, too raw. This internal paradox, this self-inflicted wound, left her perpetually caught in a cycle of longing and self-imposed solitude. Her chest would tighten, a profound sense of isolation settling around her like a shroud, even when someone was trying to reach out. The crab's natural response to perceived danger or rejection is instant retreat into solitude. When a threat looms, or even when conditions simply become unfavorable, a crab will immediately scuttle away, seeking the nearest rock crevice, burrowing into the sand or retreating deeply into its shell. This isn't just a physical movement. It's a complete withdrawal from the social or environmental interaction. For the crab, solitude offers the ultimate safety, a complete removal from potential harm or the possibility of being attacked or consumed. They prioritize their survival by avoiding confrontation and vulnerability through immediate isolation. This instinctual recoil from the external world into a protected inner space is a fundamental aspect of their self-preservation strategy, demonstrating that solitude for them is a safe haven from potential rejection or harm. The human experience of fear of rejection mirrors the crab's instinctual retreat to solitude. In psychology, this fear is often linked to attachment theory, where early experiences of inconsistent care or abandonment can lead to an avoidant or anxious preoccupied attachment style. The brain's anterior cingulate cortex, involved in processing social pain, can be highly activated by the prospect of rejection, making individuals prone to preemptive withdrawal. Evolutionary psychology suggests that social rejection was a literal threat to survival for our ancestors, as communal living was essential. Therefore, the brain developed powerful mechanisms to avoid it. Just as the crab retreats to its solitary shell to avoid being harmed, a person with a profound fear of rejection might unconsciously create distance or even self-sabotage relationships, believing that loneliness is less painful than the risk of being hurt by others, perpetually choosing self-imposed solitude as a default protective mechanism. Maria's pattern of pushing people away, even though she cared for, was her unconscious retreat into a self-made shell, a preemptive strike against potential rejection. She was now forced to confront the heartbreaking paradox. Her fear of being alone was leading her to choose isolation. Would she continue to live out this self-fulfilling prophecy, forever choosing solitude to avoid the very pain of rejection she feared? Or would she, like a crab tentatively exploring a new tide pool, dare to stay present, to risk the possibility of hurt for the profound reward of genuine connection? Her instinct was to flee, to protect herself from the inevitable pain. But the deep, persistent ache of loneliness, the yearning for a shared existence, now demanded a different, bolder choice. She had to acknowledge that her solitude was both her shield and her prison. The crab's instinctual retreat to solitude offers a profound, if challenging, metaphor for the human struggle with the fear of rejection. It teaches us that while isolation might offer temporary safety from potential pain, it can ultimately prevent the very connection and fulfillment our hearts crave. By observing the crab's immediate withdrawal from perceived threats, we are invited to understand the deep roots of our own self-imposed emotional distances. May we learn from the crab to acknowledge our need for protection, yet also to recognize when our strategies for avoidance are hindering our growth. True courage lies not in never being hurt, but in daring to stay present to brave the possibility of rejection for the profound reward of authentic intimacy, emerging from our shells to embrace the shared, messy, beautiful landscape of human connection. Thomas had always lived a life of rigid control. Every decision, every emotion, every interaction was carefully weighed, calculated, and filtered through a thick layer of self-protection. He had built an impressive career, but his personal life was a wasteland. He longed for true intimacy, for a partner, for the effortless ease he saw in other relationships. But the thought of letting go, of truly breaking his shell and allowing spontaneity, vulnerability, and genuine connection filled him with paralyzing fear. He knew his armor was protecting him, but it was also suffocating him, preventing him from experiencing the richness of life. He felt an intense, unbearable pressure building, a desperate need to burst free. But the very act of dismantling his defenses felt like tearing off his own skin. His breath was shallow, his shoulders hunched, perpetually braced for an unseen impact. The crab's life is a continuous cycle of growth that demands breaking its shell. Unlike many creatures whose skeletons grow with them, a crab's exoskeleton is rigid. To grow larger, it must shed its old, tight shell. This process of molting is a moment of extreme vulnerability, but it is absolutely essential for the crab's survival and further development. If a crab cannot shed its shell, it will remain stunted, eventually dying within its own limits. The breaking of the shell is not a choice. It's a biological imperative for growth. Once the old shell is discarded, the crab quickly absorbs water to inflate its new, soft cuticle, allowing it to expand before the new shell hardens. This act is the ultimate commitment to growth, a fearless embrace of temporary vulnerability for long-term expansion beyond its current limits. The human imperative to break the shell of old, defensive patterns and limiting beliefs is profoundly mirrored in the crab's molting process. In psychology, rigid defense mechanisms, while initially protective, can become maladaptive, preventing personal growth and authentic connection. The ventromedial prefrontal cortex, involved in regulating emotions and decision-making, plays a role in our ability to take risks and move beyond comfort zones. The intense pressure Thomas felt is a cognitive and emotional signal that his existing shell is too restrictive for his burgeoning inner self. Just as the crab must shed its rigid exoskeleton to grow, humans must dismantle outdated protective strategies to achieve emotional maturity, deeper intimacy, and a more fulfilling life. This isn't just a desired change. It's an evolutionary imperative for psychological thriving, a necessary embrace of discomfort for ultimate liberation and expansion. Thomas felt the unbearable constriction of his shell, now more acutely than ever. He was at a breaking point, a direct confrontation with the choice between comfort in his self-imposed prison and the terrifying, yet promising, path of growth. Would he continue to live within the painful confines of his own creation, safe but stunted? Or would he, like the crab, bravely face the immense discomfort and vulnerability of shedding his protective layers, trusting that a new, more expansive version of himself awaited on the other side? His instinct was to hold on, to maintain control. But the profound loneliness, the unfulfilled yearning for a life beyond his current limits, now demanded the ultimate act of courage, breaking free. The crab's essential act of breaking its shell for growth offers a profound and challenging metaphor for the human journey of self-liberation. It teaches us that true expansion, genuine connection, and deep fulfillment often demand a willingness to shed our old, rigid defenses and embrace a period of intense vulnerability. By observing the crab's non-negotiable commitment to molting, we are invited to courageously confront the shells we have built around ourselves. May we learn from the crab to recognize when our protective barriers, once necessary, are now hindering our growth, and to trust that the ultimate act of freedom lies in the courageous choice to break free from our own limitations, stepping into a new, more expansive and ultimately authentic self, ready for the unbounded possibilities of life.